We are counting down the 11 ghost towns California was never meant to keep in living memory. From tiny settlements that faded quietly into farmland, to entire communities abandoned overnight by policy or disaster, these sites reveal how the state discards what it no longer needs. Some were lost to floods, others to land speculation or deliberate erasure. Each ranked entry stands as physical proof, with structural remains, deserted roads, and foundations that point to decisions many would rather forget. Let us begin with number 11, where the disappearance was so gradual that most never even noticed it happened. In the 11th place, Purissima lingers quietly in the hills of San Mateo County. Its disappearance was more a slow fade than a single event. Founded in the mid-1800s as a farming and logging outpost, Purissima once supported a small schoolhouse, a blacksmith shop, and a general store, serving local ranchers and homesteaders. The town endured the devastating flood of 1862, which washed out parts of its creek and damaged buildings. Residents rebuilt and carried on. Over the decades, as the logging industry declined and nearby cities drew families away, the population thinned until only a handful remained. The post office closed in 1901, marking the town's quiet end. Today, what's left is subtle. Scattered stone foundations hidden by grass, weathered gravestones in an overgrown cemetery, and faint traces of roads that once connected Purissima to the coast. No dramatic collapse, just the gradual erasure of a place as economic tides shifted. Its remains set the stage for the sharper vanishings that follow. In the 10th place, Drawbridge sits quietly in the marshes of Alameda County. Its story shaped entirely by the rails that once connected it to the world. Founded in the late 1800s, Drawbridge was never more than a cluster of cabins and duck clubs, accessible only by train or footbridge. For decades, life here depended on the steady rhythm of passing trains, mail, groceries, even evacuation during floods, all arrived by rail. As passenger service dwindled after World War II, the town's isolation deepened. By 1955, the last regular train stopped running, cutting off the only reliable lifeline. Residents left one by one, with the final holdout departing in 1976. Over time, the marshes themselves reclaimed the land. Groundwater pumping caused the earth to sink, tilting houses and swallowing them into the mud. Today, fewer than 5 structures remain above water, their frames sagging, roofs collapsed, and foundations vanishing into the wetlands. Drawbridge endures as a silent warning. When a town's existence depends on a single link, its fate is never secure. Rhyolite stands as a monument to the most feverish years of the gold rush era. Founded in 1904 on the edge of Death Valley, the town exploded to nearly 5,000 residents in less than 2 years. Streets filled with stone banks, a 3-story school, and even an opera house, all built in a rush to match the promise of gold beneath the hills. But the gold vein faltered almost as quickly as it was found. By 1916, Rhyolite was deserted, its grand buildings already crumbling into the desert wind. What remains today are concrete skeletons, the imposing bank facade, fragments of the old jail, and the shells of homes that once lined busy streets. Unlike towns that faded over decades, Rhyolite's story is measured in months, a boomtown built and abandoned in the span of a single decade. Its ruins stand as a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes and entire communities can vanish when speculation outruns reality. Bombay Beach clings to the eastern shore of the Salton Sea. Its faded streets bear witness to a different kind of abandonment. In the 1950s, Bombay Beach was a place of promise. Yacht clubs, trailers, and vacation homes lined the water, drawing celebrities and families to a desert oasis. But the same sea that made Bombay Beach famous soon turned toxic. Agricultural runoff and relentless evaporation raised salinity to lethal levels, triggering massive fish die-offs and a stench that drove away even the most loyal residents. By the 1970s, tourism had vanished and the population collapsed, leaving behind a grid of empty lots and sun-bleached structures. Today, what remains is part ruin, part open-air gallery. Artists have transformed abandoned homes and rusted vehicles into surreal installations. And they stage an annual festival that draws visitors to a place the state long ago forgot. Streets still stretch toward the water, but the community they once served exists only in memory and in art. Salton City stretches across the western shore of the Salton Sea, a vast grid of streets and empty lots mapped out in the 1950s with a single purpose: to build a luxury desert resort. Developers platted more than 25,000 residential lots, installed water and power lines, and poured miles of asphalt in anticipation of a booming community. For a brief moment, the promise looked real. Land sales soared, and glossy brochures sold the dream of palm-lined avenues and marinas. But the environment had other plans. The Salton Sea, already a fragile body of water, began to collapse under the weight of agricultural runoff and rising salinity. By the mid-1970s, fish die-offs blanketed the shoreline, and the air filled with the stench of decay. Flooding and toxic water made the area unlivable. Residents left, businesses shuttered, and the resort dream evaporated. Today, thousands of surveyed lots sit empty, roads lead nowhere, and streetlights stand over silence. What remains is a monument to unchecked speculation and the high cost of ignoring ecological limits. A sprawling infrastructure built for a city that never arrived. Abandoned not by economic bust or policy, but by the land itself turning hostile. Amboy sits in the Mojave Desert, a fragment of life left behind by the relentless march of progress. Founded in 1883 as a railroad stop, Amboy thrived for decades on the steady flow of travelers along Route 66. The town's heartbeat was the highway, motels, diners, and gas stations lighting up the night for families driving west. That rhythm stopped abruptly in 1973, when Interstate 40 opened and swept traffic miles to the south. With the new freeway, Amboy's reason for existing vanished almost overnight. Businesses shuttered one by one, and by the late 1970s, the population had collapsed to single digits. Today, Roy's Motel and Cafe stands as a neon relic on the empty highway, its iconic sign flickering against the desert sky. Streets that once bustled with tourists now echo with silence, lined by abandoned homes and rusted gas pumps. Amboy endures as a stark reminder that a single policy decision, a highway reroute, can erase an entire town, leaving only a landmark and the memory of what was once a vital stop in the desert. Number 5. Eagle Mountain stands as a stark reminder of what happens when a town's entire existence is tied to a single corporation. Built in the late 1940s by Henry J. Kaiser, this settlement rose from the desert solely to support the massive Eagle Mountain iron mine. At its height, more than 4,000 people lived here. Families filled rows of company-owned homes, children attended the local school, and workers relied on the mine for every paycheck. But in the early 1980s, as foreign steel competition intensified and environmental regulations tightened, Kaiser Steel announced the mine's closure. Within months, the grocery store shuttered, the post office locked its doors, and the last high school class graduated. Residents were forced to leave, many with little warning, as the company withdrew, leaving behind empty streets. abandoned schools, and a grid of houses slowly succumbing to the desert. Many of those houses were left behind. The town's perimeter remains fenced, its decay hidden from casual visitors. Later, the site briefly served as a private prison before being shuttered again. Eagle Mountain exposes the fragility of company towns. It shows how quickly a thriving community can vanish when corporate priorities shift. What remains is not just a collection of ruins, but evidence of how entire lives can be erased by a single business decision. Number 4. Calico rises from the Mojave Hills as both a relic and a reconstruction. Its story shaped by cycles of boom, bust, and selective memory. It was founded in 1881 at the height of a silver rush and quickly became one of California's most productive mining towns, with more than 500 mines operating in the surrounding hills. The promise of silver drew thousands, but fortunes proved fragile. When prices collapsed, so did the town. By 1907, Calico was deserted, its structures left to the desert wind. Decades later, the site found new life, not through preservation, but through reinvention. Walter Knott, best known for creating Knott's Berry Farm, purchased and rebuilt Calico in the 1950s, adding false fronts and reconstructed buildings to capture a vision of the Old West for visitors. Today, San Bernardino County owns the town, operating it as a regional park. Beneath the tourist facades, traces of the original mining camp endure. Weathered timbers, stone foundations, and the scars of abandoned shafts. Calico stands as a reminder that some histories are curated, layered with nostalgia and commercial appeal, while the true remnants of the past remain hidden just out of sight. Coming to the top 3, Manzanar stands alone as a ghost town shaped not by economic collapse, but by deliberate government action. In 1942, the US government selected this remote stretch of Owens Valley to build one of the largest Japanese-American incarceration camps during World War II. Over 10,000 men, women, and children, most of them American citizens, were forced to live behind barbed wire and be watched from guard towers. Their lives were uprooted by executive order. Unlike mining towns that emptied when resources ran out, Manzanar was dismantled by policy. After the war ended in 1945, the barracks and communal buildings were stripped away, leaving only concrete foundations, the grid of roads, and silent watchtowers to mark what had been. There was no restitution for those who lost their homes and businesses. The erasure was meant to be total. For decades, the site faded into the desert, unacknowledged by official memory. It was not until 1992 that Manzanar was designated a National Historic Site, preserving the traces that remain. Today, visitors find remnants of water systems, gardens planted by internees, and the outlines of a community built under duress and erased by design. Manzanar's abandonment is not just physical. It is a record of how state power can erase entire towns and the people who lived there when convenience or shame demands forgetting. Number 2. Cerro Gordo clings to a windswept ridge high above Owens Valley, its story written in silver and fire. In the late 1800s, this remote settlement became one of California's richest mining camps, sending out shipments that bankrolled the rapid growth of Los Angeles, nearly 200 miles away. At its peak, Cerro Gordo's smelters worked day and night, with ore wagons tracing ruts down the mountain and payrolls that attracted investors from across the West. But prosperity came at a cost. In February of 1877, a fire crippled the hoist at the Union Mine, the heart of Cerro Gordo's operations. It paralyzed production and triggered a flight of capital. Within 6 months, investor confidence had evaporated. The mine struggled on, but the easy silver was gone, and disaster had shattered the illusion of permanence. By the early 1900s, Cerro Gordo stood nearly empty, its population scattered and its wealth extracted. Today, the remnants remain perched on the ridge, weathered storehouses, cabins with doors swinging in the wind, and the skeletal outlines of smelters that once fueled a city's rise. Partial restorations have stabilized some buildings, but most of the site endures in silence, far from any highway or tourist crowds. Cerro Gordo's collapse was not just a local loss. It marked the end of a pipeline that once linked mountain awe to urban ambition, leaving behind a landscape where economic power burned bright and then vanished almost overnight. And finally, in first place, Bodie stands as California's official ghost town, a place not just abandoned but deliberately preserved as a record of what the state chooses to remember. Founded in 1859 after a gold discovery near the Nevada border, Bodie grew into a bustling mining center with nearly 10,000 residents at its peak. Streets once echoed with the noise of saloons, stamp mills, and the constant movement of fortune seekers. Gold production soared, but by the early 1900s, the mines began to fail. The last residents drifted away, and by 1942, Bodie was left to the wind and snow of the High Sierra. What sets Bodie apart is not just its scale or its colorful past, but the way it has been preserved. In 1962, California designated the site as a state historic park and adopted a policy of arrested decay. More than 200 original structures remain, their walls stabilized but not rebuilt, interiors left exactly as they were found. Tables sit set for dinner, bottles rest on bar shelves, and schoolbooks lie open on desks. Furniture, tools, and personal belongings sit untouched behind dusty windows, offering a rare, unfiltered glimpse into daily life at the edge of the frontier. The decision to preserve Bodie was not inevitable. Many towns of its era vanished without a trace, their remains scavenged or erased by time and neglect. Here, the state intervened, repairing roofs, shoring up foundations, and funding ongoing stabilization through the Bodie Foundation. Every year, tens of thousands of visitors walk the same dirt streets that miners did more than a century ago, witnessing both what has survived and what has been lost. Bodie's frozen silence is a reminder that preservation is always a choice. The town's survival, protected by law and policy, stands in sharp contrast to the fate of so many others left to collapse and disappear. In Bodie, California reveals not just what it values from its past, but what it is willing to let the world remember. Across all 11 ghost towns, one pattern emerges. California's power is built on erasure as much as on creation. When industries, policies, or reputations no longer served, entire communities were left to vanish. Today, these silent remains are not just relics. They are physical proof of choices made and lives forgotten. The true legacy of California is not just what endures, but what it chooses to forget.